what is happening in Indonesia? Is it another blessing of Uncle Sam, or is it this time the dragon, dragon, China? So let's find out what's happening. What are the news reports like? What do the news reports say about Indonesia? So let's see what the Americans have to say. Voice of America. Voice of America, this news report is from yesterday, August 23, 2024. Protesters rally again as tempers flare over Indonesian political maneuvers. So, university students shout slogans during a protest against the move to overturn a constitutional court ruling that changed eligibility rules for candidates in the general election later this year in Banda Aceh, Indonesia, and so on and so forth. So, thousands of people have rallied in several cities in Indonesia, pressurizing its election commission to issue rules for regional voting amidst outrage. Outrage by whom? Over an attempt by parliamentary allies of President Joko Widodo to change the rules in their favor. So what's happened is that Joko Widodo has lost the election, and his current defense minister has won the election. And I forget the name of the defense minister, but he's going to take charge, take power as the president of Indonesia around October this year. Now, the defense minister is, well, he is Joko Widodo's current defense minister, so kind of on the same side, right? And some rules have been changed which allow Mr. Widodo's son to be part of things and all that sort of thing. And the incoming new president, the current defense minister, is a nationalist, is portrayed as a nationalist right-winger, and he's in favor of an independent foreign policy, a non-aligned foreign policy, let's say, for Indonesia, and is favor of good ties with Russia. Now, that is very naughty if you are America. Very naughty behavior. That is not acceptable. So what do? Regime change operation. So that's what we are seeing here. Now let's see another news report. Let's put that on the screen. Give me a second. Right. So what are the students saying? This is the Straits Times. We cannot remain silent. Students at vanguard of Indonesian protests amid worries about democracy. Jokowi is a mistake, it's apparently. A city in West Java. They are gathering outside Indonesia's parliament complex yesterday in Jakarta. So apparently, so what's being this situation is being portrayed as students fighting for democracy, and Jokowi is an authoritarian, undemocratic leader. So naturally, students are the good guys, and they have to do things like these, right? This is the BBC, another Western publication. Police clash with protesters over Indonesia law change, and you can read the thing. And Jakarta, blah blah blah. Now let us see another one. Okay, this is from Tempo.co. DPR KPO assure regional election law, etc. etc. One second, that's not the one. Okay, this one. Indonesian student protesters occupied DPR complex to secure MK ruling. The DPR complex is the parliamentary complex of Indonesia. So they are occupying the parliamentary complex in Jakarta. Hundreds of student protesters defending the decision of the Constitutional Court entered the front yard of the parliamentary complex as the demonstration turned chaotic on Thursday, 2 days before today. They began to enter the courtyard through a broken fence near the main gate. Western Indonesia time, the crowd who rushed in and occupied the front yard, and apparently the police or whatever could not do anything about this. Sounds eerily similar to Bangladesh. And so on and so forth, chaos, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so that is the situation in Indonesia. So the current Indonesian government is kind of has a mind of its own and wants an independent foreign policy, wants a non-aligned foreign policy, which means we take our decisions. We don't need anyone's advice or anyone's lectures. And they are okay with a good relationship with Russia, which is no from the American eyes, from the American perspective. So then what is happening in Indonesia makes sense. Naturally, right? So it's a blessing from Uncle Sam. Now, if you look back at the history of Indonesia, Indonesia becomes independent, 1930 something, whichever year it is, and President Sukarno takes power, and then President Sukarno is ousted in a military coup. And who's the guy who's the ringleader of the coup? President Suharto. President Suharto ousted Sukarno in a coup. Which year was it? Okay, let's go and Google it. Which year? Because I don't have dates memorized, like Indian students. Unfortunately, Suharto. Suharto. So he took power in 1968, and he unleashed mass killings, etc. As soon like before he took power, and he was kind of like his coup was an outcome of these mass killings and all that reign of terror, which was supposedly an anti-communist thing. Okay, it was supposedly to eliminate communists because communists are evil. So who was going after the communists in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, etc. during the Cold War? The Americans were going after this. So Suharto was an American agent. It was a US mediated regime change. It was a horrible bloodbath in Indonesia. Horrible, absolutely horrible. And then uh, Suharto ruled until what, the 90s or something, and then other people came to power. And Jokowi is probably the first non-US puppet, most likely, to be in power. So that's not a good situation, and the US is trying to rectify things. So you're going to have a regime change, most likely in Indonesia as well. The same way it happened in Bangladesh. Student protests, and eventually the situation becomes untenable. And then a US blessed regime comes to power, and the Indonesian version of Mohammed Yunus may come to power. Or maybe, to prevent such a thing from happening, the current government may become more pro US. That may also happen. So you give in, you bend the knee, you kiss the ring, and then you do what the Americans say, and then there is no regime change. And the student protests die out magically. So that's what's happening in Indonesia. The Americans are trying to completely reconfigure the political map of the entire extended subcontinental region. I mean, you got to admire the Americans for what they can achieve. They've completely encircled India. Chinese occupied Tibet, etc., is not obviously pro-US. It's entirely anti-US. But there you have it. So if Indonesia again becomes very strongly pro-US, Malaysia is already strongly pro-US, then once again the Americans can blockade the Malacca Strait. You see, the Malacca Strait is of vital importance. The Americans will soon have an island of their own, the St. Lawrence, whatever it's called, St. Martin's Island, which belongs to Bangladesh. The Americans will soon take over, establish a military base there. They will have an artificial nation called Cookie Land, de facto nation. Bangladesh is pro-US, and now Indonesia, one way or the other, will once again become a pro-US nation. And then the Malacca Strait is theirs to control. America. You got to admire that, really. That's how you do it. That's how you exercise, project power, and exercise the power that you have over various nations.